Kroger, an annual Boost membership just got even better. Now you can choose from Disney Plus with ads, Hulu with ads, or ESPN Plus on us when you sign up. Plus, enjoy unlimited free delivery, double fuel points, exclusive offers, and free items. Sign up for a Boost membership today. It's an easier way to save, including new streaming options to relax with while we deliver your groceries. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
In the mystic swirl of 19th century spiritualism, a figure of both reverence and controversy emerged, casting a long shadow over the occult and philosophical landscapes of the time. This mysterious woman traversed the globe, from the bustling streets of New York to the sacred shrines of Tibet, weaving a tapestry of ancient wisdom with modern, esoteric traditions. Claiming to be in contact with spiritual masters or Mahatmas, she brought forth voluminous works such as the Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, which purported to unveil the hidden truths of the universe and human potential. Her teaching spoke of lost civilizations, esoteric philosophies, and a universal spirituality that transcended established religious dogmas. This case file, join the theorists as we weave our way through the endless esoterica of Madame Blavatsky.
Welcome to Alien Theorists Theorizing Case File 347, Madame Blavatsky and her Secret Doctrine. I'm Braden.
I'm Zell.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Andrew.
We're fucking talking about Lady Gump here, boys.
Yeah,
this is Lady Gump, 100%.
Around the world a few times.
Around the world, seen all the things, did everything.
Did everything, man.
Yeah.
Even lived long enough to become a villain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was telling Dan before the show, I was like, her crazy ideas, attributed to like inspiring Nazis and stuff. I was like, this is why they stopped letting ladies have ideas in the early 1900s. Is because of this lady.
Scary.
This lady ruined it for all of them.
So this is Lady Gump. Now, you think if fucking
Who's
our
her
boy
Jenny?
didn't end up getting AIDS from Jenny, he would have went evil too?
Gump?
Yeah. Because Forrest didn't live that much longer after this movie.
I don't.
Like the AIDS gone.
I never thought of that.
Right?
Dude, he had endless money though. I'm sure he
So
helped.
did Madame Blavatsky.
Yeah, but I'm sure he helped like him and Matt. Like if there was a sequel to Gump, I'm sure him and Magic Johnson are finding the cure. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I don't think he had magic money. Or he probably had more than that.
He did.
Yeah.
Gump,
a lot of money.
100%. He had that shrimp money and that Apple
And
money,
Apple
that
money.
early Apple stock money.
Ping pong. He got Pong money too.
Pong money too. Oh, 100%, dude.
yeah, that's-
he was he
Got that Terry Fox money.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Where would he have been? He would have been he would have been a governor or something. This
No, he
point
would
in
have
his
died.
life.
He listened. He got AIDS. It was before they had they had the good stuff. Rest in peace.
Forrest Gump was what, late 60s?
96, 98?
No, I mean, like is in Vietnam War, wasn't it?
Yes.
Like
Oh, yeah.
60s, 70s?
Yeah.
But I think it goes to present day, I thought.
Like they were still leeching people back then.
Lobotomies and the rest. Yeah, who knows?
We're talking about-
we'll have to get a sequel to Forrest Gump, but for now,
There
we'll have
was
to
a
go with
second. Isn't there a second book? I thought there was like
Gump
the
and
first
Co.
one.
Yeah.
Really?
I'm pretty sure there's a
Yeah, there's a second
there's
book.
a second book.
I've never read it. I was like,
I've
how
not
do you
either.
It
how do
wasn't
you top
movie
the first
material.
No, nobody wants to read a book about a poor guy getting AIDS and dying.
Well, I think in the first
I've seen
book,
Philadelphia. It's not
originally,
good.
like
It's
he also
sad.
goes to the moon or goes to space. He becomes an astronaut too. Like they left out some professions in the first Gump from the book.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah, I should read it. I love that movie, so I should read it. But Madame Blavatsky,
It's one of those names that pop up a lot
everywhere.
through, anything to do with like occultism or, spiritualism or Nazis.
We're cults.
All cycles back to the Nazis usually. But
Esotericism. Is that a word?
Esotericism.
it is.
Esotericism?
It is now if it wasn't.
Esotericism. Esotericism. Yeah, that's a word.
But other than I knew like just very, very, very surface level. People always said like, oh, it was the Nazi party took some of her teachings and made it their own. And then you had the Third Reich. We all know how that fucking went. So I was like, this girl must be insane if that's what it led to. But it turns out it started a little more
Pretty PG.
pretty PG to start for the most part. If it depends it also depends who you read talking about her, because there's so much material on her. It's tough to
Well, she published she's published like 5 books, and like two of them are like 1,500 pages each. Like,
Yeah.
like it's just like, she wrote a lot of herself.
Basically,
stone by stone.
it was me and the giant.
She's H.P. Blavatsky she's an interesting character, and like a lot of her stuff, a lot of her teachings, because she did found Theosophy, which is a school of thought and philosophy.
I thought that it was Ottman that founded Theosophy, and
she's founded the Society of the Thoughts.
After
Theosophy,
she kind of
they popularized it.
One of the common themes of her is repurposing other people's ideas and religions. And tossing her old name on them, and
synthesizing, taking other stuff and putting them together. And,
well, and that's how do you say that again? I keep fucking up the word
Theosophy.
No, you should have made him sound
Theosophy.
Theosophy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
say
still
how
like
you want to say it. We'll understand it.
Photo.
There's still like active members. Like it's still like they claim to have like 40,000 active members.
We still have Nazis too. It's weird.
Yeah,
it's the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
That's true.
She was born Helena Petrovna von Hahn in Yekaterinoslav, which was the Russian Empire at the time, and which is now currently Dnipro, Ukraine. So she was technically born in Ukraine. Her family was a family of noble lineage. Like they had royalty in their bloodline. I think her great grandmother.
Doesn't that mean like all the royal people had Vaughn in their name?
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure. If I remember correctly.
But I think like her great grandmother had been a princess of like some note. So her family had both Russian and German roots, and she was born under somewhat like not auspicious, but like pretty dire circumstances, because when she was born, like a cholera epidemic had busted out in that time, and her mother
big fucking deal. There was all sorts of epidemics back then. Every fucking week. It just depends when you were born. You were being born in the midst of some sort of fucking disease running rampant through whatever area you were in.
I guess it would probably be more notable if she was born not during an epidemic. I guess I suppose.
Yeah.
So her mother was Helena Andreevna, she was also a noted novelist, like of her time. Like she was someone people knew her for writing novels.
17 years old.
And she was 17 years old at the time.
Which is kind of impressive though, to like you're raising a daughter and you're a novelist at that age. Like, yes, you're affluent, right? You're not really struggling other than with cholera, but like being 17 years old, having a kid and becoming a fucking female novelist at that point in time, it's pretty impressive.
That is impressive. However, I mean, if you think about inflation back then, life inflation, I mean, that was like 43 years old. You know what I mean?
Not even though, because her dad was like fucking 40 something, like 46. Right? Like
he was probably
so he was like 100.
Yeah, he was 100.
No, dude, he was riding horses and kicking ass. Like he was an active fucking.
Yeah, but back then you didn't get old and like you got sick and died. You would be healthy one day and the next day they're like, the wasting got him. Like,
I mean, you could be like back then though, like you're young and you died too.
Yeah.
Like 1 out of 2 kids die.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's fucking nuts.
That's her, because H.P. Blavatsky, I mean, she had siblings as well, and I think 2 of them died. 2 of them died in infancy.
Her brother died. I know that.
Her brother died.
And
I think she had another sister too.
She was marked for death too. Like her and her mom, they were basically like, yeah, you and her and her mom were not supposed to survive.
Yeah, I think her mom was sick with cholera when she had when she had Helena, like when she had H.P. Blavatsky, HP. It's
crazy. I wonder. I bet you that plays a part, man. Like even as a kid, with having these like, would you call that a near-death experience? Like being born into that environment, being almost dead with cholera. Like it definitely just people who
changes
that happen to are
start.
special people, man. Usually,
well, according to Braden, that's like everybody back then. So like everybody has the plague back then. So I don't like, her father was Pyotr Alexievich Han von Rotterstern, and he was a captain in the Russian Royal Horse Artillery, and eventually he would rise to the rank of colonel. So like Andrew mentioned before, like they were an affluent family, like they weren't hurting for money.
The horses?
Yes.
What is that?
You shoot our horse artillery, so they shoot the horses out of the cannons. Yeah, they shoot the horses out of cannons.
What is that? Do they pull the artillery cannons?
It's like they're like trebuchets. They load them into the trebuchet and then they launch them like that.
Launch them into battle.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess like her father was like, since he was in the military, like he had postings all over the place and traveled a lot. So there's stories that say that I think it's alleged that he didn't even meet her until she was 6 months old. Like he was still stationed in like a different area of the Russian Empire when she was being born. And then along with that, like the family would move from place to place a lot. So it's like she always had the opportunity to travel a lot of these things. So people say that may have contributed to her worldviews and being more expanded than your normal person.
At a young age, right?
Exactly.
That's impressive. That's
seeing different cultures, being exposed to it in your formidable years.
So, and then there would be points like where there would be like long periods of time, like, years where her and Helena, H.P. Blavatsky's HP, I just refer to it because her mom is Helena too. So it's hard for me to distinguish between the two and call her HP. Well, HP's father and her mother would often go for like long periods, like apart from each other. He would get stationed somewhere. She wouldn't want the mom. They're pretty sure she just didn't want to go to some of these places, and then would go stay somewhere else, like in another city or something. And a couple of times, for example, when her maternal grandfather, Antony Fadiev, was assigned to become a trustee of the Kamlik people, who were like an indigenous people to like Central Asia, who actually practiced Tibetan Buddhism. Blavatsky and her mother actually accompanied him to like their area a couple of times, and then he would befriend like their leader, who was known as Tumen. And apparently like Blavatsky and her mother would go and like holiday with these people. And a lot of historians will say like, this is where she got a lot of her teachings, like a lot of her exposure to the ideas of Tibetan Buddhism.
Cult. No big deal.
No big deal.
I mean,
well, they weren't really a cult. They
weren't a cult. They were like indigenous people, like nomadic people who lived there.
Yeah. Just hanging out with the Huns.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, yeah, they lived on the Russian steppes and such. So around 1841, the family would end up moving to, which is at the time it was called Tiflis, and now it's Tbilisi, Georgia. And this is where they say that Helena or HP is like really starts to begin to be observed having an interest in mysticism and paranormal phenomena at this young age. And then
she was full emo, like full emo kid.
She was pulling
My Chemical
glasses across the table,
and shit,
across the table with the Force already.
Yeah. Bending spoons.
And then, sadly, like a year later, this is when her mother would die of tuberculosis, and she was at the age of 28. And so after that, Helena and her HP and her siblings were sent to live with their maternal grandparents in Saratov. And so since her grandfather Andrei had been appointed the governor of Saratov, and this is where she says that she discovered a personal library within their estate, like they had their big old mansion place like this, and this is where she found a bunch of books that had been part of the library of her maternal great grandfather, Prince Pavel Vasilyevich Dolgorukov.
Names are fucking
it's so hard. I'm trying. And this is where she said that she had her first experience meeting one of the masters, which she would eventually come to refer to some of these spiritual gurus.
Yeah, like this is where she's being observed too. Like, so this is when she's kind of like she's learning how to ride horses, and she's getting like private tutors brought in because they kind of want to. I think the idea by her grandparents are to like turn her into like a lady to get her married, right? Like, kind of get her a little bit more refined. But this is where she kind of, like you said, she met the masters and kind of let her freak flag fly a bit. She's hanging out in the dungeons, talking to imaginary friends, and fucking, doing little seances and just kind of getting a little crazy. Getting her Wednesday Addams on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the age you're doing it, right?
Is it?
That's what this is
14,
40,
15, 16?
I think she's younger. I'm pretty sure she's
teenagers.
younger than that, isn't she?
Well, it's about, that would be 42, so she's probably a little bit, she's almost 10 or something like that. Maybe.
Oh,
Yeah,
10.
like it's a little.
Just getting into it. But that's in life inflation back then. That's like 13, 14. Teenage.
So then, so when she has she mentions later in her life when she talks about her teaching, she talks about these mysterious masters that teach her about all of the ideas behind theosophy and the esoteric ideas that she has and she pens down later. And she said one important experience was that she actually had in that library where she was climbing up like a stack of books in order to reach like a very high shelf or something like that, and it ended up, unstable shelf of books. What do you think's going to happen? Gravity takes over. She fell and she should have been injured, but then she said that she felt like a force or something catch her and then, kind of lay her down.
Soften her fall.
And she said that she saw in this, like, haloed by light, the image of like a kindly Indian man. So she kind of something like that. That she
like
said
from India, like that,
like from India.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And,
what are you doing on the floor, buddy? What do you want some help?
And so it's like this would go on like to be a very formative event in her life, and like she's like, this is the first time I met this one of the gurus that would lead to my spiritual expansion.
Everything goes through India for her, right? Like that's the big change.
A lot of it goes back to
like that's kind of like the center of theosophy for her and like mankind. But
so in 1849, she marries Nikifor Blavatsky at 17. She's 17. He's 40 plus. He's in his 40s. And then
following mama's footsteps.
Yeah.
But
That's how it was back then.
I think
it was with the more affluent people. That's kind of how you did it. Like you had these rich fucking older dudes,
Older man,
that would find somebody from
young
good
lady.
stock, a young lady.
And you'd
with good
because
family.
is it the idea you can just sire more children?
I don't know.
You got more time.
better chance or younger.
This is the time pretty much when girls' job, like their job was just to have children. They didn't.
And sometimes having a children was like a death sentence. Like you were 50-50 chance.
You have 10 kids. I mean, you're rolling the dice.
Yeah.
Something bad's going to happen.
A miracle.
It's insane. It's fucking 2025, and I'm worried that I might not make it through my vasectomy.
I've exactly. I feel I might die from it. Actually,
That's what I'm saying.
Something bad's
Like-
going to happen. I had a panic attack. We'll talk about it in after hours.
Like according to her, they never consummated this marriage. Like while she was staying with, she was shipped off to stay with Nikifor. She made repeated attempts to escape from and return to her family.
Like on the wedding day, she had like a plan on the wedding day. She had hired people to kind of like kidnap her and take her away.
Is this the marriage where she claims she never consummated the marriage? And she has that great quote where she's like, my mind is like a volcano erupting constantly, but I'm a glacier down below. Talking about like her sexual appetite. She's like, nothing. My brain is going all the time. I'm not interested in sex, basically. I thought it was a really funny quote.
It's probably the steady diet of fucking cigs. Probably lowers the libido.
Yeah, I'm not sure when she takes up her. Yeah, she was known for having quite the cigarette habit, tobacco habit at some point.
Blavatsky fucking rips cigs.
She hack
hard.
starts. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Buddy.
But after like a lot of unsuccessful escape attempts, like eventually they just kind of relented, and then the family was like, fine, we'll take you back. They sent her, they requested her to return, and they sent like a servant to go and pick her up. And she was going to go to Odessa to meet her father, who then was going to take her to St. Petersburg with him. And then, but Blavatsky at this point, yeah, she kind of just said that, well, she ended up fleeing those escorts, like evading them, and then bribing a captain of a ship that would take her to Kerch, and then she would reach Constantinople. Like, that's where she was going to end up going.
It's crazy to me because...
Isn't it Budapest?
Constantinople.
Isn't it changed names a bunch of times? Isn't there a song about it?
Budapest and Constantinople. And
I think it's Budapest.
It's Budapest now.
Is it Budapest now?
I think so.
Is it?
it's Budapest now.
Budapest.
Constantinople is not a...
Budapest or Constantinople.
Budapest.
It's Budapest.
Budapest. So
it's crazy to me, though, because she escapes from her wealthy older husband, but he then still proceeds to like ship her money.
Yeah, I kind of thought
like,
that was... Yeah, pay for her the entire time.
Yeah, they were still technically married. Like, they were still technically married for a long time. Yeah.
Even after she married her second dude, she still called herself Madame Blavatsky.
Much later.
I kind of wondered if it wasn't so much as like if this is the first where we're seeing her accounts of things where it wasn't really that she ran away or did that. It was that, maybe like her father, this guy was working out of town. She's just like, yeah, I fucking left. And that's why this guy's still sending money, because he's like, oh, I'm just working out of town. What do you mean?
Well, it could be like, I wonder too, like he probably held his vow of marriage like pretty.
I kind of feel like
this was couldn't have been his first. He's 40.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of thinking. I'm like, it's
royal. Kind of royalty.
I mean, maybe he had his own side pieces back when she left. It's like, listen, this is an agreement.
Like,
You're going to go. Because I don't know about you guys, but I didn't find Madame Blavatsky too Blavatsky. You know what I mean?
Wait, it's not Budapest. It's Istanbul.
Yeah.
That's
Isn't
what it is.
Only
it's
pictures of her when
Istanbul and
old,
Constantinople are the same city.
What did she look like when she was 20?
Well, I'm just saying, I'm like, sometimes you can tell. You know what I mean?
Blah.
You can tell.
Blavatsky.
You can kind of de-age it, but like, nah, never.
Yeah,
never
and you can sometimes you can squint and de-age, and I'm like, that one, you're like, I don't think she ever looked.
Yeah. She had been described as handsome very, very many times. And I'm like, any chick when you call him handsome, I'm like, that's like you're trying to be nice.
Right.
She had a strong jaw, all right?
Yeah.
So when she escapes to Constantinople, this would begin the period of Blavatsky's life that would... There's not like a lot of reliable information about this period of her life. I mean, there's a lot of
by her.
Yeah.
First-hand account. Well, how can you not doesn't get any more reliable than that, right?
Right. Unless you had, if you had some corroborating sources, it would be nice. And, I guess you don't need those for this kind of thing. But, this is when she would begin her full blossoming into her mystical studies, or actually like this is the pre-mystical study stuff. So 1849, she begins travel extensively through the Middle East, Europe, India. This is where she claims to have studied a lot of the esoteric traditions and the occult sciences that she would eventually kind of synthesize into the main things of theosophy. And she later claimed that in Constantinople, while she was there, she developed a friendship with the Hungarian opera singer named Agardie Metrovic, who she found bleeding like from stab wounds in an alley, apparently, after like an attempted murder. And then they became fast friends.
Well, and then she guarded his body while help came. Like she had a gun.
Yeah, she had a
knife, and people were coming to try to get him, and apparently she guarded him and protected him. And I was like,
this girl's whole life would make a great TV series. Like every event there's been no dull parts, and she's still young. She's like Nancy Drew. Something new happened every week.
And so 1851, she said that she met, this is when she meets her in person. This is the first time that she says that she meets a mysterious figure in London who she identifies as Master Moria, who it will become one of her spiritual guides. And this is where she says she received like her first real mission from the masters to travel to Tibet. Like she made it her life goal to make it to Tibet, and there she was going to attain more of the esoteric knowledge that would help her.
Why Tibet? Like Tibet's a hub, man. Adamski was all about Tibet too.
How the fuck?
Probably because she was all about Tibet.
Yeah.
You didn't at this
back then. They probably like, we don't even know this is a real place. But it sounds cool.
I think Tibet was under Chinese suzerainty is the term for it or something. Like it's still it was like
hard, isn't it hard now to get to Tibet?
I mean, yeah, like back then, like you couldn't get in because I think like it was officially like closed off to foreigners because I think the
like
Chinese
sneak around and.
Yeah, like you. I mean, if you wanted to get in, you could, but you got to like trek through a bunch of like bandit infested mountains and stuff like that, and like places you don't want to go. But I mean, if you really wanted to get in, you could. And I think they were actually allowing pilgrims, like religious pilgrims, were allowed entrance into Tibet at the time. So that's what some people are saying, that eventually, when she claims that she did make it to Tibet, like maybe. Perhaps she posed as a religious, like she could have passed for a religious pilgrim to get in there. Since there's a lot of sites in Tibet that are significant to both Hindu and Buddhist. Like it's a couple of places that you could probably make your way into. But yeah, she made her way to Asia via the Americas. So it's like she went all the way around. She went
took the long way.
She went to Canada, where she said, you know, she wrote this out in one of her books where she was going to seek out the knowledge.
And Canada was fucking brand new.
Like this is 1851. And so yeah,
Canada
like
yet, actually.
Yeah.
Technically.
Really?
Still loose confederation.
It's just the fucking north of the wall.
It's a colony. It's a
point.
British and French colony still at this time.
And this is when she said that she visited.
She said that we should tariff them 25%.
She prophesied that.
She did.
She wasn't so much interested in economics, but she was interested in the mystical knowledge that she kind of thought that Native American communities in Quebec would kind of be able to bestow upon her, that she would be able to kind of
she read
go
one
and
book
see
one time. I was like, I got to go talk to those people.
Yeah, and then she's quickly disillusioned with that because she apparently was robbed and then by some of these, which she might have identified them as Native Americans, though she kind of wrote this off to being as an influence of Western civilization on the natives, and then that they had turned them to this. So she's saying that, like, you know, that's why.
She's like, they would have never robbed me if it wasn't for the white man.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
hey, Auntie, give us your cigs.
Once she makes her way,
walking into a fucking RBC after fucking 6 p.m. Is that what happened?
Once she makes it through the U.S. and makes it all the way through, I think she went through places like Texas, went through all kinds of places and all kinds of adventures, I'm sure, in the U.S. at the time. She attempted to enter Tibet for the first time, but this is when she was denied entry by British authorities since China had closed off Tibet to all foreigners, and she couldn't make it in that time. So she ends up like trying to, the first time she says she didn't get in, but in 1856, she says that she would travel again to Tibet. She'd make another attempt, and this time she would end up making it through. Like she joined up with some she says she joined up with some caravan with some Tartars and stuff, and then and managed to make their way through the dangerous mountain passes all the way up into to meet with her masters there. I think it was, she said Master Moria was one of them, and another guy who keeps coming up is Kut Humi is one of the other guys, who was like a real person, I think. And this is where she, evolved her esoteric knowledge, and this is where she started learning about the supernatural abilities that could that these masters possessed with their deep understanding and knowledge of the universe. Some things like she said she witnessed them exhibiting things like clairvoyance, clairaudience, telepathy, the ability to control other people's consciousness, basically Doctor Strange stuff. Like it's all Doctor Strange stuff. Dematerialize, rematerialize,
portals,
project astral bodies, like all that
grand
stuff.
Wizards is what you're saying.
Yeah. And it's all hanging out, all, Sorcerer Supremes, these guys. So 1858, it's documented that she returned briefly to Russia. This is where
how much what I want to know, a documented travel day count of how long she's, because we're talking month-long journeys to get to get to these places, and she's doing them on a whim,
no flights,
at will.
And this is not a healthy person.
No,
she is fucking ill. She's got cholera. She's got a bajillion other problems with her, and she is literally Carmen fucking Sandiego.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying that she would trek into the the Tibetan mountains, the Himalayas, and stuff. And if you see her, you'd be like, I don't know if you'd make it up.
Tibet's at
it's a real high elevation.
Tibet's at around 4,000 meters plus 14,000 feet. So you get altitude.
Be winded. Anybody would be
altitude
winded.
Sickness if you don't build up to it.
She looks like she'd get altitude sickness climbing the stairs.
Yeah.
Plus that stig habit. Plus that the just constant. She's just ripping cigs. She's climbing up Mount Everest, man.
Well,
she just doesn't even care.
If she's got sorcerer powers.
She's got a hanging.
Well, back then cigarettes were good for you. Everybody knows that. Back then,
doctors recommended a nice pack of Camels. To ease the stress back.
And listen, and you know what? We're forgetting the power of belief too. So if you believed wholeheartedly that cigarettes were good for you, maybe they were then. You know what? Maybe this is just big propaganda against big tobacco.
It's true. The placebo effect is real.
Yeah, we start believing it causes cancer. Now it does, right? Never did before. Everyone was fine.
It.
Yeah.
I manifest that beer is good for you. Mm-hmm. Alcohol is good for you. And you can do anything you want.
New study on its way.
Just starting right now, actually.
No, just now.
Check back in 20 years.
So when she returns to Russia, for a short period of time, this is where she starts kind of having audiences with people, and then being this is when they said she started showing signs of developing these psychic abilities that she had learned from some of her masters and while she had stayed in Tibet.
The other thing I had a question about with just all our travels that popped into my head is, how are you bankrolling this back then? It's not like I understand that. But what are you carrying a sack of money with you?
But you got
promissory
Papa
notes
Nikifor's got some doubloons headed her way. She's doing well.
What do you you hooping gold coins? How you have fucking paying? How you paying?
You probably pick it up. You probably write a letter to your dad, say, "Hey, I'm going to be here in the next month or so," and then you send something to the bank, and then you go pick it up.
There was that good of a banking system. There was a fucking credit union where you give Money Mart basically back then.
Probably a lot of it's on their name, just being signing off promissory notes or something. I don't know, that kind of stuff.
There had to be something like that. Everybody's traveling back then.
Yeah, it was not. People were getting around.
Back then they were on voyages. You know what I mean? They were fucking.
Yeah, she sounds like she's been on one giant fucking voyage this entire time.
She probably had some. I would say I don't know who carried all her stuff. That's what I want to know. Who carried it? It wasn't just her. I know she had stuff. But So 1864.
Ask Grass, I guess. She had two or three at least at all times.
In 1864, so shortly after she kind of returned to Russia, and she was kind of going around hanging out with her family, she said, Blavatsky says that she fell from her horse, which left her in a coma for several months with a spinal fracture. And then when she recovered, she said that she awakened the full power of her paranormal ability. She awoke into that. So that coma gave her time, I guess, to kind of
she Charles Xaviered her legs, her bottom half of her body. She was actually paralyzed from the waist down, but she just Charles Xaviered her legs.
Just telekinetic, walk them.
Doesn't do that.
Why doesn't he?
That's what I mean.
Because he's not a telekinetic. He's a telepath. He's a powerful telepath. He's not telekinetic.
He's not Jean Grey.
Yeah. So then there's this interesting period, which could probably be a whole thing in itself, where 1870 to 1871, she joins the Italian revolutionary Giuseppe Garibaldi in Italy, and then would become in like part of the Italian Revolution at the time. Because Italy wasn't a country. If people Italy wasn't a country until very recently.
Is that where she said she fought shoulder to shoulder with? Giuseppe
She said she fought. She fought. Yeah. And then this is where she says she got like scars on her arm that she would show later to some of her companions and stuff. Like being like,
this like bullet holes in her.
Yeah. She was like, she's like, I had a musket ball lodged in her arm or something. And people could touch it. I don't know.
Imagine that guy, that fucking revolutionary dude meeting her and being like, she's going to turn the tides. This is our secret weapon.
Right? You know what?
This is the girl.
This is the chick. This is going to change everything for us.
So in 1871, after she's done
short, stocky
Russian lady, ripping cigs, should be like Tom Sizemore in fucking Saving Private Ryan, or not Saving Private Ryan. Oh yeah, no, Saving Private Ryan.
She 18s, yeah.
Dude, she said in that battle, she claimed that she was shot and left for dead in one of the battles that she fought in, and then just willed herself to
survive. She wasn't such great buddies with Giuseppe.
They even buried her body, and then they saw these little wisps of smoke coming from the ground. Like, is that cigarettes?
She's a fucking sorcerer. She can do whatever she wants. Sounds like.
Apparently, because she even in 1871, she apparently survived the explosion of the ship that she was on. Apparently, she boarded the SS Eunomia, which was bound for Egypt, and the entire ship exploded. And Blavatsky was one of the only 16 survivors on that ship.
It exploded how?
Dude, she's unbreakable.
Boiler
That's
exploded.
What it is. She's unbreakable.
Like
they're putting weights on, and she's like, more. I can do more.
She's fucking bench pressing paint cans, buddy. She's unstoppable.
Yeah, she's every dude. Now that I think about it, she's been in like, that's not the first time. She had another wreck at sea. She survived too. She claimed she's survived 2 wrecks at sea.
Wait, so this one that she's sailing to Egypt. The ship explodes. It was like in the middle of the ocean, and she swam.
Yeah. Like she made it to shore. Like it floated, got to shore.
Back floating, hacking darts.
Just on a floating door.
Yeah.
Not even. Just fucking backstroking.
Yeah. You can
put in some good distance on the backstroke, a little back float. Yeah. You could go a long way. Slow.
Dude, she looks like her own little steamship. She's just like puffing out smoke. And
honestly, the sea's a little buoyant, so it's like it's doable. It's doable, right? And if she's just like, whatever, it's all good. But I imagine the explosion, like in my mind, like she didn't go down with the ship. The explosion cleared her from the ship. Like she got ejected. Landed in the water.
And so after this event, this is where Blavatsky makes her first attempt to really form a kind of like society, not like a cult, just like an organization around the ideas that she's kind of forming, which fit kind of within what at the time, like spiritualism, which is becoming like a big kind of deal, mover and shaker in the philosophical world. And she, with the help of a woman named Emma Cutting, established what was called the Societe Spiritae. But apparently,
it's not really attributed to her at all, but like not so much. But like you got to think that someone surviving this many things going on, like you have to have some sort of like ego thing popping on and be like, I'm meant to be here. I can't die. I have a purpose. Because like I'm fucking, you know what I mean? Like you're
bulletproof.
Like, I am bulletproof.
I don't think ego was ever her problem.
No.
Like, I think she's fucking well endowed in that fucking aspect.
Unfortunately, she didn't really have good luck with the Societe Spiritae since like after 2 weeks, she shut it down.
She spent some time with Italian revolutionaries with that name.
Societe.
I think Blavatsky at that point, like she personally kind of closed it down. I think she was she's one of the founding members and kind of like a big pull to that society, but she figured out that most of the people are like who claim to be mediums, because that was the thing back at the time, like your spiritual medium. She figured that they were frauds. Like she didn't believe that they had real paranormal powers, and then she just kind of pretty much shuttered and closed down.
Yeah, natural disasters have you survived? None. Well, you're a fucking fraud.
You're out. You're out.
Yeah. How many fingers am I holding up behind my back?
Wrong.
It's just I find hilarious though, right? Because like you look back, this is around the same time as like the Fox sisters and stuff, right? Where they're making their little sideshows, dislocating their knees and popping. And if I'm not wrong, has Blavatsky not started doing similar shit, like making her little glove float and all that? You know, like
she did. I think I can't remember. She's like she made a distinction. She goes on about how she makes a distinction between like what people do as opposed to like necromancy, which is like talking to the dead, and then like also communicating with the dead. I think she made a distinction between the two, and she said like what she does is different from that. Like I think she had like the telekinetic and all of those, like the telepathy and all of those kinds of abilities, but like communicating with the dead was something that couldn't really be done. Just that's how she thought about it, at least, and thought a lot of that stuff was kind of like on a different wavelength or something like that. She didn't really believe in that part of which was spiritualism at the time, beginning with the Fox sisters. Blavatsky was like not down with that. Like she was like, I have my own stuff.
Hack shit.
Or that she believed that a majority of the people who claim to be spiritual mediums, she was like, they're not. Or it's like, yeah, she's like, I think it was because she was saying it was like there's people who talk to the dead and there's people who channel the dead, you know, and then there's like people who the dead talk through them. And like either one, I think she was not like really, she was kind of like, no, that's not. Don't work. It didn't work for her. So in 1873, this is when she moves to the United States. So she comes to the United States and she ends up in New York City. And then she would like shortly after she moved there, she apparently was like living in like a women's co-op house. And they said that, there's not like real records, but people figured that she was just making a living somewhat, scraping up some cash from making like artificial flower bouquets and stuff like that, I think is what they said she worked on.
Conning people.
Well, not really. Like she wasn't even like doing that stuff yet, or allegedly conning people.
Well,
but then she was
been a prostitute too for a bit.
Doesn't matter.
You got to do what you got to say.
You know what? I kind of figured when I was thinking about like how was she paying her way, that idea did cross my mind. I was just like,
yeah, I mean, she's gonna have to knock off a few of those icicles down there.
Or she did.
She's talking about.
She just has money. Like she comes from money.
She comes from money, but that's why there is a part where she does, for whatever happens, like it takes a while for her estate to kick in. Yeah, where she does kind of have to live a little lean. I remember hearing that, but
yeah, I think she was like receiving some type of people kind of figure that she was receiving some kind of allowance from her father, not like a big one, but enough to like kind of like get around. But then she would receive a sizable inheritance upon his death. Once he died, this was shortly after she moved to the U.S. Like a year after she moved to the U.S., he died, and then she received a big old inheritance check from his estate. And then this is when she would end up moving into like a nice swanky apartment. She moved out of the co-op, got a real nicely appointed apartment and all that. And then she would start kind of traveling around again. So 1874 is when she meets her, like I don't know, you want to call him like this, like her soulmate for a while. This is Henry Steele Olcott, who is a reputable lawyer of somewhat. And then he was also a Civil War veteran. And he was at the time he was working as like a reporter. And they both attended this same this seance presentation that was going on in Vermont. And this is where they become like super best buds, BFFs, like forever. And if you see like the pictures of them together, there's like one picture of them together, like Olcott and them together. I was like, yeah, these look like two people that would hang out back then. He's got this awesome, crazy wild man beard. Like he's just like this really long, crazy beard. And I guess like they had names for each other. Like he called him something. He called her Jack. Like he's like, yeah, I call her Jack all the time. I was like,
she looked like a Jack.
She looks like a Jack, right? Yeah. So I was like,
she had this dude wrapped around her finger though.
Yeah.
He was fucking picking up what she was putting down.
Exactly. Like he kind of, they both resonated on the same frequency of some, I guess, because he actually, I think when he, as a reporter, his whole thing was like busting like fraudulent people, like busting people who were in spiritualism and stuff like that. Like these,
keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
But apparently when he talked to and had conversations with Blavatsky, like he was like, no, her ideas are completely different. This stuff makes sense. I'm down with this. We need to make this. People need to know about this.
Yeah, what she's doing isn't fraudulent. It's real magic. She's got real powers.
So in 1875, they both co-found the Theosophical Society, where it's like
what everyone when you hear the name, that's what most people think of, this society.
Yeah.
And that's
this is like, I mean, she's noted as the founder. This is it.
All right, this is a good place to take a quick beer break as we prepare to take on Isis Unveiled. Also name of my first metal band. We'll be right back.
This is a good one.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
All right.
We're back.
Vasectomies, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Right. Yeah. So Olcott and Blavatsky would found the Theosophical Society, which is this, their whole goal was to bridge the Western and Eastern philosophies at the time, which was kind of this was the chic thing to do. Spiritualism was kind of on the thing. And then like I said, Theosophy was kind of like on the other side. It had some pieces in there and bits and pieces in there. But the thing is, it's like, even though in 1877, this is when Blavatsky publishes like her first book, Isis Unveiled.
Hey,
did you get that name from her book or like?
Okay, so I told Dan quickly during the break, but you weren't here, so I'll tell everyone listening to the show. My first metal band, we were looking through like old books and we came across this book, Isis Unveiled, and it's like exploring like mysticism of ancient science and blah blah blah. We're like, that sounds pretty metal. We'll do that. Named our band Isis Unveiled, wrote 5 songs, recorded like some shitty demos, played it like one show, and then on the second show is when like ISIS, the terrorist group, became in the news.
They became unveiled?
ISIS, the terrorist group was unveiled. And then our next show was like, it was awkward, being the point where like, ISIS? All this white guys with short hair, like spiky hair, like
wearing you got your fucking wristband, your wristband,
like, spikes on my wrist and like a fucking wallet chain.
We're Isis Unveiled. Crickets.
Just pure screaming vocals, and then everyone's like, "What the fuck? Are these guys terrorists?" Yeah. So that band lasted obviously no time at all, unfortunately. But it was just funny that it was like immediately after. It was like ISIS, the terrorist group, is beheading people on YouTube. We're like, oh, well.
You're like, metal. That's metal, yeah.
Well,
all publicity is good publicity, man.
They didn't have the ISIS terrorist group then.
Yeah.
So Isis Unveiled would go on to be pretty popular, and gain her a lot of fame and like accolades at the time. Like the book was a financials and like philosophical success. But the Theosophical Society did not take off as what they kind of thought it would. Some people say that it's kind of because like the Theosophy was more like philosophical. It's more like, talking about, the universal oneness and like more thoughts and philosophy, while spiritualism was still gaining steam, because spiritualism is like, people were having shows, like they were doing all the bend and spoons and like the spiritual medium stuff. Like it was like stuff that people would present. It'd be like, people wanted to go in the crystal balls and all of that stuff. And Blavatsky, even though she claimed to have all of these paranormal powers, she wouldn't do it in public. But she would do it freely in private, is what some people claim.
She would do it in public, in private.
It's for the same reasons when we were in, was it in Austin? where we asked the media, or was Noah's in Vegas? We're like, hey, we'll pay you, but we need to record it. They said, no chance.
Oh,
Similar reason.
Yeah.
You know, you start seeing the strings and like little foot bumps under the tables that they're doing.
We wouldn't have, dude. We were fucking 6 sheets to the wind the whole time. We were like, this is insane. She'd be like, how did she know my address? And be like, meanwhile, we gave our fucking licenses at the door. Like that's
It filled out all the forms.
Yeah. So 1878 would mark the day, or mark the year that she would become a naturalized American citizen, and she was apparently the first Russian woman to do so.
See, the movie continues. Like, it's insane. Every fucking turn, there's something crazy.
But after the kind of the falling off of the Theosophical Society, her and Olcott would eventually travel to India. Like they figured that they wanted to be closer to kind of what was perceived as like the spiritual center of things going on. So they wanted to go over there.
After she got her American citizenship, she's like, all right, peace.
Going to India.
Moving to India.
Oh, she's a traveling wheelbarrow. She's got to go. Can't hold it.
I think Olcott took a job.
45-day boat ride to India real quick.
Yeah. I think Olcott, and it's crazy because like Olcott just got a job there as like, I think he was like a U.S. trade representative was like his title or something. He's just like, yeah, I just picked up, I was a reporter. Now I'm going to become a U.S. trade representative. It's just crazy back then. People just get jobs like whatever. Yeah, you know, you just pick up and whatever.
Well, yeah, because you fucking write your resume. Like just like fucking Blavatsky's doing, making 90% of the shit she does up. People are like, oh yeah, she said it's gotta be real.
Can't check it. Who's like, can we call anybody on this? No, I'm telling you right now.
No, they died of cholera.
Oh, okay.
Like, damn, tuberculosis.
This is when I think they hooked up with like there was like a Hindu revival kind of going on at this time because India was very much right at the time of being oppressed by the British and all of that stuff still going on. And so while they were there, they would go and establish like a new chapter of the Theosophical Society and put the headquarters there. And then they would begin working on a monthly magazine called the Theosophists. And this magazine would go on to be a little bit popular because it did manage to garner like a pretty sizable following, since it did kind of co-opt some of the ideas of like Hindu and Buddhism, which are two major religions kind of in India. So then a lot of people kind of it resonated with the cultural like the cultural stuff that was going on at the time.
It was interesting too, though, because like this is around the time where you were getting a big push of like Christianity in India as well. Mm-hmm. And she did a really good job of like trying to keep the Indians with like being like, don't switch, like, embrace your culture, embrace your, your religion and stick with it.
Don't listen to the English.
Honestly, and don't listen to them and stick with your culture and everything. And it's like, especially considering what she gets up to later, you're like,
they're going to force assimilate you if you listen to them.
There was a time, I think she, one of the persons who like ran went with the magazine, like they got like a new manager, and he said that kind of to make a small little change to somewhere. So it's like, stop calling them the masters, call them Mahatmas, and then call them Mahatmas. And then they like, that got them like, and that apparently increased some circulation or attributed to some of that. But yeah, there was now like this cultural pushback to some of like the Western ideas that were in cultural values that were kind of pushing into India at the time. And then like the Hindu reform movement was kind of pushing back. And so she was right in the middle to kind of there to take advantage of that. And then kind of her ideas kind of slotted right in with a lot of that. And but in 1880, she would kind of, her and Olcott would like officially take like the Buddhist vows, and they would become Buddhists, like they would become official Buddhists in Sri Lanka. And apparently she was like the first European woman to do so formally to be documented.
The first of a lot.
I didn't realize
the movie continues.
I thought Buddhism wasn't a religion.
It is. Like there is religion to be Buddhist. Like there is stuff. There are formal vows that you can take. I forgot what they're called, but they said it in one of the Blavatsky biography things. But it was like, I forget what it's called. But there are actual vows that you can take to become a Buddhist, an official thing. But it is somewhat just a kind of a way of life and things like that. And there's different types of Buddhism too. So it's all kinds of fun stuff about in there. So around 1884 is when she would start, and this would probably be like a whole thing on its own. This is when she would start running into accusations of fraud of her psychic powers. Yeah. And these things that she would do. And one of the like the more prominent voices that go into there was Richard Hodgson from the Society of Psychical Research, which we could probably do a podcast about them, which is just like these guys going around and being like investigating psychic phenomena.
They're just like,
these things, paranormal phenomena. Like they would go in there and be like legitimately investigate this stuff, which is kind of cool. And so she would get like, I mean, she got stuff from everything from people like calling her a fraud. There was people that had worked for her that said that we have letters that Blavatsky wrote to us to give us instructions on how to fake a lot of this stuff. You know, one of the things was like, oh, we have her like these letters are written by Blavatsky. We had a handwriting specialist come in and look at this, and that's her handwriting.
Well, she used to write, like she would write Ottman letters from the masters.
Right.
Whenever he didn't want to do something she wanted to do, like, well, we're going to India. He's like, fuck that. She's like, well, I got this letter from the masters.
Yeah. There's times where she said that, and like some of her books where she said she wrote from like, there were collections of letters sent to her from the masters. And then people were like, no, these letters look like they're kind of just written by you, but using a different writing with like your left hand or something.
And she's like, they're writing through me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, but, you know, all of this stuff would kind of maybe it took a toll on her, both, you know, mentally and physically, because in 1885, she would return to Europe. And then but she was also like it starting to become, you know, poor health at this point. And a lot of this stuff like did a lot of damage to her reputation and the Theosophical Society at the time. And then she would go ahead and then like the stuff would kind of a little bit. Yeah. But she'd end up like in Würzburg, Germany. And then again, she moves like all over the place. It's like she's
nonstop.
She go to Germany.
That's what I mean. The movie continues. She's everywhere.
Maybe her health wouldn't be so shitty if she would just stop traveling. Imagine how backed up she would be all the time.
You don't want to shit on a boat.
I can't fucking you go on a small trip. You can't shit.
No, I guarantee back then it was the reverse was the problem.
Oh, dysentery.
You couldn't not
shit. Dysentery. Oh, just get a little dysentery.
Oh,
you'd be like, yeah, it's good.
You're just on that boat, both ends the whole time.
Let me just drink out of this rain barrel. Let me clear it out real quick. But 1888 was even though she was in poor health at this time, this is when she would publish what is kind of like her magnum opus, probably like the work that she's best known for, and probably the one that has like kind of lasted the longest that people and would have the most impact culturally in some of these areas, which was known as the Secret Doctrine, Volume 1 and 2, which is like, it's 1 and 2 because it's like 1,500 pages. So you have to publish it in 2 volumes because no publishing house would be like, no. And it was like, because it was so long and she had to publish in 2 volumes, no publishing house at the time would like do it. So she's like, fine, I'll do it myself. And she founded the Theosophical Publishing Company in order to get it out to print this 1,500 page tome.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, when it's that big, it is a tome, right? Isn't that difference between a book and a tome? It's like fucking like huge. This thick. It's like 4 inches thick, and it's just this giant fucking book. Yeah.
And what the first one's called Genesis, right? Exogenesis.
Cosmogenesis.
Cosmogenesis,
part of the volume.
And the second one's called
Anthropogenesis.
Yes.
Did you want to try and say it or?
No, I'm good.
Do you want to try and spell it or?
Yeah. Anthropogenesis.
$1 million question.
So this is the Secret Doctrine is then the subtitle is the synthesis of science, religion, and philosophy would be her kind of attempt to put all of her worldviews and all of her stuff into like one work, like one working model ish, and try to explain what the whole meaning of theosophy and Western esotericism would be at the time. And like we already mentioned, it had 2 volumes to it. You had Cosmogenesis, which focused on the origin and the evolution of the universe. And then volume 2, which would be Anthropogenesis, which centers on the origin and evolution of humanity. And this book, because I read some of it, and it's
I listened to some of it.
And so it starts
read.
out that she pretty much, like, the first one, Cosmogenesis, is taken from what is known as what she calls the stanzas of Dian or Dian. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it. I don't think anyone's
the
sure.
stanza of Dan.
Stanzas of Dan. And this is, she says, like, she either received these telepathically or these were, like, printed on these, like, crazy white discs, like these invulnerable white discs, uncorruptible white discs that she received from the masters, and she was the only person able to translate them while she was staying in Tibet. And
Yeah. Is this the language she discovered? I forgot.
yeah, she said she translated them from
A secret language. That only
secret
she
language
knew.
up there that only she was able to translate.
She had the cipher
And-
code to figure out this
brain.
language in her brain,
And
it
it's
was
like-
given to her.
And these things are like they are stanzas that outline the universe's evolution in symbolic terms. So here's like they're just like these, it's like poems and just like all symbolic and metaphorical stuff where it's like, these are like quotes. The vibration sweeps along, touching with its swift wing the whole universe and the germ that dwelleth in darkness, the darkness that breathes over the slumbering waters of life. The root of life was in every drop of the ocean of immortality, and the ocean was radiant light, which was fire and heat and motion. Darkness vanished and was no more. It disappeared in its own essence, the body of fire and water, of father and mother. And it's like a whole bunch of these. So the entire first volume starts with that stuff. And then it's just her commentary on all of these things, explaining what this all means in kind of everyday terms, but still kind of way out there. Like, her stuff is pretty, it's an interesting read. I found it kind of fascinating. Like,
it
found
could be tough
interesting.
too, because she's translating it from a lost language that only she knows. So maybe she made some mistakes.
And a lot of the times when she's making these commentaries, like she writes she's like, this is really difficult to explain because it's all stuff that you can't comprehend and is incomprehensible by its nature. And I'm going to try to explain it to you. And then she tries to explain it to you.
Oh, dude, it sounds like a shroom
Listen, lady,
strip.
if you can't
How many-
explain it because you made it up, nobody can.
Dude, I'm telling you,
You're fucked.
if anytime you've done shrooms, Zell can probably attest this. There's a time during your trip in shrooms and you unlock some secrets and you're just like, you make these connections. You're like, just as fast as you realize, you're like, I can't forget this. You're like, what was that? What was I just thinking? It was big. I don't remember anymore.
Dan, you ever done
Look at
shrooms?
that.
No, I have never done
I've
trips.
never done shrooms.
No.
Yeah, you unlock the secrets of the universe in
But you
real
lose them
time.
again.
Yeah.
And for like the 2 hours while you're like at the peak, you're thinking about them. You're like, all right, I have to take this. I have to do something with this. I know this is important. And then during the come down of shrooms, it's like
You lose it.
I remember. I forgot. What was that again?
Yeah.
And then it comes back again. You're like, oh yeah, that's right. And then it just slowly like waves its way out of you, and then you come out of it, you're like, God damn it, that was important. I fucking know it was.
And
then it's gone.
Forgot it again.
That's why one time I would love to do a little bit of mushrooms and record the whole thing. I'm going to talk the whole time. I'm going to fucking remember everything I said, everything I was thinking.
It's just you laughing. It's just you laughing for like 2 hours.
There's no thoughts. Nothing
Just
actually
like-
comes out.
It would sound, you would like, if anyone listened to that recording, you would be fucking put in a psychiatric hospital.
No, I wouldn't.
I think-
I'd probably just be put on the streets. That's where we keep. Yeah, that's where we go. There's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
There's no like nice warm place to go. It's just you go on the streets.
If people are looking for a very dense and opaque read, I would say pick it up. It's interesting. Like, it is kind of a fun read. It is all of this stuff. It boils down, like, at least the cosmogenesis stuff kind of boils down to these three metaphysical principles that dictate a lot of theosophy. It's like, one is the unity of all existence. The universe originates from an absolute, unknowable divine essence called the unmanifested absolute, or para-Brahman. So it's like that everything comes from a universal truth, a single point, and like in the universe, and everything radiates out from that or generates from that. She has a lot of there are some cool stuff in there that she talks about. And when I'm reading it, of course, me, big sci-fi fantasy nerd, like, I see this stuff in like fantasy and all this junk when she's talking about how, light and dark or light is just a product of dark. It's like you wouldn't have light without the dark. And then you have shadow that's also in
And
there.
there's a group of people that
all
also
kinds of
thought
crazy
this stuff was really cool.
about 50 years after her death, it really came out.
So
I went down on the original teachings of what she would say would be like the universal brotherhood, that there's a nucleus of universal brotherhood
White guys.
Without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color was exactly what she quoted as saying early in her work.
The Nazis took that wrong because she said without, and they took that as yes, without any of them.
Without the rest. Without the rest.
Yeah. She was right, without any of them.
So yeah, what we're mentioning, and probably people a lot of know, is that Blavatsky, a lot of her stuff, theosophy and like the stuff in like the Secret Doctrine, was co-opted by some Nazi ideologues. Like there are definitely some connections that people draw in there, and they say that a lot of the occult and esoteric stuff that was preached in like Ariosophy, the dominance of the Aryan race, or the superiority of the Aryan race, that a lot of the Nazi party kind of subscribed to. A lot of this stuff was pulled from Blavatsky's occult teachings.
Well, we got to talk about, because one of the cooler things about, it's a cool concept in the initial writings, and yes, it gets adopted by the Nazis. The Aryan race is the superior race for whatever reason.
Sounds like that's a cool idea. I like that.
You know what? If they, I'd be rich by now if that would have taken off, but never happened. But she talks about she claims that there's 7 races, and the races are not like skin color or by geographic location. They're like time. A time of humanity is a race.
Right.
So the first race she calls the Hyperboreans.
Yeah.
So it's like a spiritual race. Purely ethereal,
pure
like pure energy, like an energy being. And that's so we started, this race was like the start of humanity. That's how we started. Right. And then she goes in, she calls the second root. She calls them root races. So there's 7 of them. 5 of them have happened and 2 are futuristic. The second one, or she calls it the Lemurians.
Lemurians?
So we talk about Atlantis and Lemuria of these lost lands, but she talks more of it's a lost, it's almost it's a different species, almost it's pre-humanity.
I think it's different spiritual evolutions is kind of what she puts it as, different kinds of everything becomes they start off as pure thought, and then it becomes wholly thought. Physical.
Yeah. So these Lemurians, then they are the first physical bodies, primitive and rudimentary, but they're more of a solid form than the first, but not fully material, somewhere between realms.
Right. I think they're also between, she says they're between, there is no distinction between sex. There's no male or female.
They have no sexual differentiation. They do reproduce, but it's asexual. They just give birth to the next version of themselves.
You get a little quado, and then it just eventually pops out.
It just pops out, and this starts growing in front of you. And then the third root race she calls us. Oh, sorry. So it's the second Lemurians, or the second Hyperboreans. And the third race is the Lemurians. And that's the third root race. And that's where humanity begins. That's where you would recognize what we are back then.
Yeah.
There's no dates or anything. It's just this is how it was back then. And then we move forward.
In her book, she does talk about there is some type of there was interbreeding between she calls it a beast race. She says there is some interaction between these spiritual beings and this physical beast race, and this is where you get humans. She has this idea of what I heard some people calling it as a degenerism or something like this, where eventually where you're basically saying that there was an advanced previous race that was more advanced, more spiritually evolved, or any of this stuff, and then we have devolved at this point. So anyone who is closer to this race is kind of being they're more more advanced, more superior, technically, is what the kind of the Nazis took and kind of ran with at this point. So she goes into a lot of specifics and stuff, and there's some stuff that she says in the anthropogenesis stuff. She says some kind of stuff that's based on science, but from that day, it's very much a product of the time. She talks about, because she's a staunch at the time, she was like always like she was against Darwinian evolution. Like she was against that. She was like, this isn't, it doesn't make any sense. The stuff that he says,
the root races that just like jump.
Yeah. There was like one really crazy part where she talks about like indigenous Tasmanians, which are now gone. Like they don't exist anymore because they were out, Western.
Because she went and visited, gave them all TV.
But, well, she was saying she's saying that it reinforced her idea because at some point, like there had been a study done where like there had been, offspring from relations of Western colonists and these Tasmanian indigenous people, and they came out sterile. And she was saying that this was proof that like you can't interbreed some of these, because they're sterile, that means that they're they're inviable. They would be like, this is proof that, certain stages of humanity can't thing. But, historians now have been like, no, that's because all those sailors and stuff that are colonists were giving them all a bunch of VDs and like making a bunch of diseases and everything were just rampant down there, and they made them sterile. And back then they hadn't figured that out yet. And so Blavatsky's like, see,
Mm-hmm.
because some real weird, because she was talking about how the Aborigines and Australia and stuff were like, she talks about them as like lower stage of evolution, like separated. It's some crazy stuff. But like I said, it's a product of the day,
Sure.
And so she was very much a person who kind of put out there like the universal brotherhood. And when she talks about these spiritual ideas and these things, like she doesn't talk about like races. She's talking about like spiritual evolutionary stages.
Yeah, well, I want to keep going because this is one of the cooler things. This is one of the cooler concepts that she kind of writes about, right? Mm-hmm. So,
and she speaks about
root race, the Lemurians, right there. We kind of like just jumped off there, but they were capable of telepathy and other psychic phenomena. And they lived more in like harmony with nature, like more like how right now, right, we should live like that, more harmony with nature, like don't pollute the environment. That's kind of how she portrayed these people. And then it went to the fourth root race, which she called the Atlanteans. And this was like a highly advanced, both physically or spiritually and technologically. So like, the sunken city of Atlantis, they had all these advanced mathematics and advanced building techniques. And this was a world beyond, like something futuristic, but it was a long time ago. And then, so that happens, these lands of Lemuria and Atlantis, they flood, right? She kind of stays with the flood story in the sense that these lands disappeared under the sea. And then we entered the fifth root race, which now in modern times triggers because of, the Nazi party. But she called the fifth root race the Aryans. And it was actually a balanced evolution of physical and spiritual capacities. So kind of like a blend of the last two. And had nothing to do with like color of skin or race or like geographic location. It was just like, this was the era of humanity, was called the Aryans. And then somewhere along the way between when she wrote this to when the Nazi party came into power, it became Aryans were light-skinned, generally blue-eyed, European-looking people for some reason. I don't know. I actually don't know where that fizzled into that. But pretty much that's where it went. And then, so now we're into the future races. The sixth root race would be future humanity. And it's something like more like you kind of like almost going back, like more spiritually enlightened, more like you're kind of going back around to being like a light being. And then the seventh root race would be the final race, right? So it's the last stage in our development.
Evolution.
Spiritual and physical, highly like divine, enlightened being. We've transcended like all the limitations of our physical bodies. We're be able to rejoin like the cosmos, the light beings, the galactic.
Only if you were
Federation.
good, though. Only
Maybe.
if you were good and you built up good karma, would you join that?
Isn't
so-
I think
she
there was
the one
something-
that
she's
like
like, they
coined
didn't have a
karma
moral
and brought it to the
framework.
Western world? Or is that something she just claims?
Well, she brought the
she's-
swastika to the Western world. Like that's like the Buddhist symbol of like
Pretty sure she
Good
brought
luck.
karma too.
Good
I think
health.
that, or at least popularized it.
She like made it like more like a Western term.
I don't think
People
there's really,
understood it.
I'd have to go back there, but it's like, at least in the Secret Doctrine, they're talking about like moral framework. It's just kind of like, there's no like morality or things that she talks about. It's just like stuff that doesn't necessarily have to be good or bad. It just kind of happens. Like you're just, the way you develop spiritually is like, you have to explore all of these things and you have to take the time to meditate and all of this kind of stuff. But, in these things, she talks about how like Zell says, like, you kind of have to go through all of these stages in order for us to join this oneness. And like I think she kind of talks about like there is like a pantheon of gods, but they're not like gods in the sense that we think about them. They're just like, they just exist on some level. And they are like these purely super spiritual beings, and that every god, to attain that level, you have to go through the human stage. You have to go through our stage of being like going through all this. Cause I'm not really sure they put into like reincarnation.
Well, they did.
There's some mention of it, I think.
I read at one point, like if you, with good karma and stuff, you'll go into this, like this pantheon of like eternity, just awaiting to come back. And it's basically like a grand circle, where it's like once you come back from there, you'll be reincarnated into the human form again to do it all. A lot of
it, her stuff talks about just cycles and like the cyclic.
Dude, she was on shrooms. I'm telling you, when you're on shrooms,
she wrote a religion on fucking shrooms.
She was on cigs.
Cigs. She was smoking ergot in those cigs. This fucking dried fucking ergot. What was ergot? What did it grow on? Wheat or something?
Right? Wheat. Yeah. You know, the witches. Witch hunts. You know, the witch. That's what makes you a witch.
Yeah. Or makes people think you're
like
a witch.
all these like early teachings of hers is just like super out there spiritual, not grounded in really anything, talking about fucking Atlantis and like just crazy shit, really, especially at that time.
Yeah.
Like, Atlantis? What are you talking about?
Well, Atlantis had been around. It had been around since Plato, but like that idea of Atlanteans,
just the one
and
story of
Hyperborea.
Atlantis from Plato, right?
Yeah, but there's like the Hyperborea is like another idea that had been kind of come up by another author like earlier, like in the 1800s, like had kind of come up with that idea of like this mythical northern land of where there was some sort of advanced civilization had come down. So it's like, yeah, like a lot of people say she just kind of took ideas from different cultures and stuff that she'd been exposed to and then kind of like mashed them all together, like Hindu and Buddhism, that she had kind of extensive, at least more contact.
A lot of people just call her an idea thief. They do.
Well, and she took a lot of ideas from like where other religions she noticed were kind of interconnected and kind of like, and would kind of draw to that.
Sounds kind of like Christianity.
You can also
really popular.
Yeah, she kind of
religions.
says that too. She kind of accuses like other Western religions of being like, yeah, you guys stole stuff and whatever. And I would kind of be like,
Christianity's like Greek Judaism.
In the books, I'd be like, when you read the book, it's kind of like she's just explaining stuff in the closest terms that she can explain them in. She's like, this is the closest thing to this idea. This is the idea that the Hindus have and the Buddhists have. This is the closest that you can get that we have conceptualized this stuff. Like, you know, this is the easiest way to understand it. I feel like when I read this stuff, she compares a lot of it. She's like, they have this word for it. They have this idea and this is whatever. Like in the
my
book.
favorite part though is like she's explaining this to like Hindus. Explaining their religion to them, and it's like, oh yeah, but you're wrong because
it's like some. I mean, probably back then there was some pushback because some of them were like Hinduism was kind of like being pushed to the background, you know, so it's kind of bringing some of this stuff forward, and then you know a lot of people like Westerners, like this was the first exposure they had to some of these ideas, and they're like, yeah, I mean, some of this stuff sounds kind of good, like sounds kind of neat.
Well, it was really, I guess at the time it was. She was offering up like a different route, especially in like America and stuff of like, you're going either like Christianity or Darwinism or this fucking, you know, you're still, you don't believe either of those. Why don't you come to the mystic arts?
Well, it was fun. You know, it was different. It was fun. It was popularized. You got like, she's like basically the fucking 1800s, you know, trust fund fucking TikTok famous people. Right, that was popular and got to fucking get her own little followers and shit like that. Like it was trendy, it was cool. Like the people that followed her were also fucking rich, aristocratic type fucking.
She happened to be
like
in the right place at the right time. Like you could say it's some luck.
Well, she was in all the fucking places, Dan.
Yeah,
She was in every
All the
fucking
time.
place. For me, it's like
Carmen Sandiego.
how the fuck did she travel across the world like 9 times?
She didn't.
without dying.
She fucking didn't.
She was,
She
on
was
a
a
boat that
novelist just like her
exploded.
mom.
The boat exploded and she just washed up on shore with like 16 others. Was there anyone else alive that cooperated? I was on that boat too, you know?
No,
Like the one person.
I was on that boat.
Her
They all died
sister,
of cholera right
her
after.
sister wrote memoirs, and it contradicts a lot of the stuff that she claims. So it's
A lot of her life, like we said, like that after she ditches Nikifor or whatever, it's like a lot of her life is like all that we know to go on is Blavatsky's word. Like that's it.
Like obviously
just-
like the like her religion that she created and that stuff, like sure. But like the travel stuff and
Yeah,
all,
the
like,
meeting the
how?
masters and like
How?
all of this and like, and she like the people that she hung out with in the Theosophical side, they always wanted to meet the masters, but I think they always said like she kind of put them off from
No
being
one
like,
met the
no, you
masters.
can't meet it. Like nobody met the masters, and but when they did want to
you
meet
wanna
them,
meet the
they-
masters? Hold on.
I'll write a letter.
She goes in the
like,
back closet, comes out with a fucking little mustache and a hat.
Yeah,
Well,
turban on. Like a little,
the other thing is like, okay, well, if we're not believing that she was at least very, very well read. If she wasn't well traveled, and that's a
She
lie.
was rich.
Oh, she was educated. She was-
Her
yeah,
mom was a
very well
fucking
read.
novelist.
Yeah,
yeah,
checks
so
out. But like,
she is a polarizing figure for sure. This is what
100%.
everybody uses to refer to her. But she is interesting. Like she is her.
Oh, without a
she
doubt.
made a huge. She's made a huge impact that people still talk about her today. And yes, the Nazis took a bunch of her stuff and ran with it. But I would also say it's like a lot of this stuff kind of would taken out of context. Like you can because of its ambiguity. Because just the,
sorry, what the Nazi stuff?
well, the stuff that they kind of took from her, I would feel like a lot of it was taken out of context in her books. Like a lot of the explanations and things that she talks about, it's stuff that like because of its ambiguity and the way that it's written, you can pretty much just take any of it and apply it to any ideology and be like, okay, yeah, like, you know, and then because she was popular and she had some sort of credibility, the early Nazi ideologues had a pretty easy time kind of adopting some of those things because it really slotted into with like at the time Volkish, like the Volkish idea, which was the idea of like Germans back then were like pushing this idea of like the power of runes and, you know, traditional secret knowledge that was held
buddy,
by these
I would
like
love to get my hands
shamanistic,
on
all
some
of this
runes.
stuff. Because a lot of the knowledge that she talks about in her books is being like, it can't be represented in writing. A lot of the teachings and stuff are represented by symbols and sigils, and that you can like hieroglyphs. They represent an idea, a concept, not really like a sound necessarily, like a word. It's just like these ideas and whatever. And then that was a lot of that slotted in with the kind of the idea that the Nazis were pushing at the time, being like all that stuff. So there's some nuance to it, but
There's a lot to it, no doubt.
Yeah,
I would
if you
say
want,
pick up her stuff.
We are
It's like,
probably
it's
the
fun.
shortest fucking podcast on Madame Blavatsky, or the shortest anything you can fucking watch or read. Everything else is
Blavatsky.
36 hours long.
Blavatsky.
Mike
Blavatsky.
Blavatsky.
Yeah,
You're a loose cannon, Blavatsky. You totaled 7 cars in 2 weeks. Mayor's on my ass. Don't worry, Chief. It's all oneness. It's all universal brotherhood. God
We're all
damn
one.
it.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons to it. You could go her early life stuff, whatever. It's all the later life stuff, like all the religion stuff and the teachings and the 7 races, like all this crazy stuff that still to this day people are following that. You know, it's like it's still pretty big.
Obviously, people have to read it for themselves because there's no way. Like I'd be like, don't believe anybody who tells you like this is what she's
If you
saying.
want to
read it.
listen
Just
to Dan read a 1,500 page tome, tune
I
into
do not
Patreon
wanna
where he's
read
going to
that.
Yeah, let us
be doing
know.
10 chapters a day for the next 4
That
years.
is insane. 1,500 pages.
there is some like absolutely fucking epics. Like there's that one video Dan you sent us. It's the first part of her, like someone reading her book. It's 12 hours long. I was like, oh my god.
That's why I said, I was like, if you want to listen to it at like 3x speed, like maybe. But it's like, I would say you'd have to read it because it is like when I was reading it, I was generally fascinated with most of these thoughts. I was like, these are kind of cool. And, you know, again, like big sci-fi nerd, I'm like, hey, this kind of sounds like this.
Fascinated
this sounds
with
like
the
this
racist
book.
talk.
This sounds like this cool
It does.
book.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it was kind of
Sounds probably what the Nazis were saying when they first started reading.
Oh,
it.
I like this. This sounds
It's
right.
good. It speaks to me.
We got to go from
Especially that white power
we
stuff.
got to narrow down the Aryan race to like something we could like get on board with. But other than that,
What we see on the mirror.
Yeah.
That's a good start.
it was a I'd say people read her stuff. Like that's generally the Secret Doctrine is it's a trip. Like
fun.
It's a trip down Nazi lane.
Yeah.
Be careful.
It's a name that I heard a lot, never really knew much about, and now we know
How we do.
a fraction more than we did before.
I think she's a fucking.
Yeah, she might be a little,
She's a grifter.
a little bit.
Yeah, 100%,
Little
dude. She's
bit.
a little fucking pork chop, dude. There's no way. She's three russet potatoes stacked on top of each other. Like there's no way she's doing.
She
not.
went around the world like 7 times.
There's
in
no
a fucking
way.
steamship.
trekking
and
up
then
to Tibet twice.
climbed
Yeah.
to Tibet twice.
No.
She's full of shit.
When
She's
no one
just
could
like-
go to Tibet, she goes to Tibet twice. Climbs
Yeah,
up.
like I think she's like.
She would have been like the first. She would have been like the first Western.
She's the
woman
first
to have ever done it.
fucking person to do a lot of things, according to her.
Dude, she's basically L. Ron Hubbard in like, you know what I mean? Like before Ron Hubbard, she's like, this will be cool. I'm gonna make my own fucking religion and shit.
Make my own religion.
I thought about it as well. Yeah, make my own religion.
We've talked about it. The ATT cult.
It'll come.
What happened?
Well, these few beauties have joined the ATT cult, actually, ATT religion.
Oh,
They went to alientheorist.com. They hit that support tab. They signed up to support their boys, support their favorite podcast. This week we got Zachary Ward, Wes
Yeah.
Aldridge,
Yeah.
Master Apprentice. Is that a combo? I'm not sure. Is that a twofer? Doesn't matter.
Rule of two.
Rule of 2, Master Apprentice.
yeah. I like it.
Jordan Bean,
Beans.
the Omni Key, and Edgar Arenas. Thank you very much for supporting the podcast. Fucking appreciate it.
Yeah, we need it, buddy.
do.
And as we always say at the end of these things, keep those eyes on the skies.
Stay warm and save every day. All in the Kroger app. Get 16-ounce packs of flavorful Private Selection Angus 80% lean ground chuck for $4.99 each. Then get 2-liter bottles of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, or Canada Dry for $1.49 each, all with your card and a digital coupon. Shop these deals at your local Kroger, less than 5 miles away. Or tap the screen now to download the Kroger app to save big today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.